The Chiapas region of southern Mexico is one of the last places on Earth where untouched cloud forest still exists. Once this land belonged to the Aztecs, who worshipped the plumed serpent god Quetzalcoatl. Their empire was vanquished long ago and reclaimed by the jungle. But a forest spirit they revered as sacred still haunts Chiapas. Now, as then, these remote high cloud forests remain the home of the bird they called the resplendent Quetzal. In Central America, true cloud forest is only found cloaking hillsides between 2,000 and 2,500 meters. One such area is the mountainous Chiapas region in southern Mexico, close to the border with Guatemala, where the Quetzal is still the national bird. The rugged profile of Chiapas is made up of steep volcanic peaks. The eastern and western slopes are hidden by thick tropical forests. The central plateau is dry scrubland, while the upper slopes support extensive coniferous woodlands. And above them, with their heads in the clouds, the highest peaks are covered by dense, dripping cloud forests. The rain and mist are the lifeblood of the cloud forest, which isn't just one habitat, but several, stacked on top of each other, like the layers in a cake. Each layer, from the forest floor to the top of the canopy, 35 meters above, is home to several different communities of wildlife. On clear days, the canopy and upper reaches of the trees are bathed in sunlight. This is the habitat of a splendid variety of bird and other animal life, rarely seen from the ground. In fact, most of these creatures live, feed and breed up here without ever venturing down onto the forest floor. Beneath them, it's a different world. The hanging mist and heavy rain nourish an almost impenetrable tangle of plant life. Huge ferns struggle to catch what little light filters down through the foliage above. The constant mist and high rainfall mean that humidity is almost 100% and the ground is perpetually waterlogged. Under these conditions, everything decays very quickly. Underfoot, the entire forest is crawling with life. Snails feed on vegetable matter, both living and dead. Millipedes, the size of a man's finger, feed on dead leaves which are recycled to form a rich compost of droppings. The red and yellow bands warn predators that they're highly poisonous. They do in fact secrete a deadly cyanide. It's certainly enough to deter these particular predators. The The coati is a small carnivorous animal related to the raccoon with a keen sense of smell. It's not uncommon to find bands of 20 animals roaming the cloud forest floor, but these groups consist of females and young only. Outside the breeding season, the males live apart. In fact, these solitary individuals were once thought to be a separate species called coati mundi, or lone coati. Play is very important for the young coatis. It develops the skills they'll need in later life, such as rolling logs in search of lizards and beetles. Insect life abounds in the forest. Forest butterflies probe the earth in search of minerals and salts. As well as flower nectar, they'll also feed on dead matter and animal droppings. Nothing is wasted. Wasps collect the dead wood and chew it to build their paper nests. Giant beetles spend the day sleeping among the leaves. When night falls, they'll take off and fly through the forest in search of rotten wood where they'll lay their eggs. Where the sun penetrates, orb spiders spread their webs to entrap passing insects. On the ground, hordes of iridescent beetles gather to find a mate. Once mated, the females will disperse and produce the next generation. Other animals on the forest floor are less social and live solitary lives. The coral snake feeds mainly on small rodents and lizards, and its color serves to warn other animals that it's highly venomous. The rat snake, as its name suggests, eats rodents, which it kills by constriction. It's an excellent climber and would certainly raid the nest of any bird in the branches above. The keeled scales and vertical pupil are the hallmarks of a venomous snake. Godman's viper inhabits the highest areas of the Chiapas, as its local name, Nauyaca del Frio, viper from the cold, suggests. But despite its venom, it could easily fall prey to this forest floor dweller. The collared peccary is a small wild pig that lives in groups of a dozen or so. Peccaries become active during the early evening and spend the night foraging in the leaf litter. Green iguanas only venture down from the branches to lay their 2 or 3 dozen eggs in the soil. If the peccaries find their nests, they will soon dig out the eggs and eat them. Their eyesight is poor, and their hearing is less than acute, but their sense of smell is highly developed. Three or 4 meters above the peccaries is another lair of a different habitat, home to a new cast of characters. Here, ferns, bromeliads and orchids cling on to the branches and trunks of the trees to try and reach some all-important sunlight, their exposed roots catching moisture and nutrients dripping down from the trees above. The ruddy-capped nightingale thrush has built its nest amid the dense vegetation. Cloud forest birds normally only have 2 chicks at a time, although 2 or even more broods may be raised in a single year. It's a sound strategy. By having fewer offspring, but more often, the birds avoid putting all their eggs in one basket, as it were. Many nests fall victim to predators. This way, at least they can make up the loss later in the season. It's not until some time after dawn that the rufous saber-winged hummingbird is ready to fly. This tiny bird goes into a state of torpor or hibernation each evening in order to save energy. Only when it's warmed up can it take off and begin to feed. For a bird that burns so much energy, nectar is the ideal fuel to keep its wings buzzing at up to 70 beats a second. This intermediate zone between the forest floor and the tree canopy is the home of what we normally think of as a ground animal. These night hunters descend from the trees after the sun has dipped below the horizon. The gray fox is a forest dweller throughout much of the United States and Mexico, but it's seldom seen because of its nocturnal habits. Mice, squirrels, small birds and eggs are its favorite prey. But, like all foxes, it's an opportunist, taking what comes. And at certain times of the year, it feeds almost entirely on fruit. These are essentially solitary animals. But should one grey fox meet another during their nightly wanderings, then the subservient animal quickly adopts a submissive crouch with ears laid back. Such behavior eliminates the need for physical contact to establish supremacy. The grey fox is also known as the tree fox because of its remarkable climbing ability. As dawn approaches, the foxes return to the safety of the branches where they'll spend the day. "25 meters above the sleeping foxes, the forest canopy is adorned with bromeliads. A group of black-handed spider monkeys are about to set off on a day of foraging and feeding. Spider monkeys have long, flexible arms and legs and an even longer tail. It's remarkably prehensile, naked at the tip, and is used as a fifth limb as the animal moves through the trees in search of fruit. "35 meters above the ground, A pair of emerald toucanets have built their nest inside a hollow tree. Despite their large bills, these birds can't dig out their own hole, but simply take over an old woodpecker hole, often eating the resident chicks in the process. The toucanet's own chicks are well grown and are being fed on fruit and insects. Both male and female help rear the young. Why toucanets should need such a large bill is a mystery, especially as they feed mostly on soft fruit. It's probably some kind of signal, like a cockatoo's crest or a peacock's tail. But the toucanet's bright colors fade into insignificance alongside this bird. The Quetzal is one of the world's most spectacular birds. The male is an iridescent green, and his tail feathers are almost as long as a man's arm. It's easy to see why it's known as the resplendent Quetzal. Glancing sunlight transforms his plumage from emerald to deepest sapphire. The female is less striking and lacks the long tail feathers. Nevertheless, both she and the male were once held in high esteem. The Aztec god, Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent, was half Quetzal, half snake, a mixture of good and evil. Quetzal tail feathers were so highly prized, they would be worn by nobles. Montezuma's crown was an elaborate headdress made of feathers from more than 200 birds. The plumes were plucked from living birds which were then released. If you killed a Quetzal, the penalty was death. The Spanish conquistadors were not so conservation-minded. Soon after their arrival in the 16th century, the Quetzal disappeared, along with the Aztec civilization. For many years, the Quetzal was thought to be extinct, until the mid-19th century, when they were rediscovered living high in the canopy in remote pockets of cloud forest. In the Chiapas, the Quetzals nest in April, often in holes 30 meters from the ground. The Quetzal either digs out its own hole or enlarges an old woodpecker nest. The female does all the work at this stage, pecking out a chamber and ejecting the chippings. When she has finished, she waits for her mate to examine her work. The male Quetzal has to be sure that the nest is big enough to take both him and his splendid tail, as both birds will take turns to incubate and feed the young. A few minor adjustments, and the chamber is almost complete. The female will lay 2 pale blue eggs among the loose chippings at the bottom of the hole. Throughout the cloud forest, other pairs are following suit. This particular tree has been used by Quetzals for several years, but dead trees slowly rot in the wet, and the birds will have to move on after a few seasons. The birds are now sitting on eggs, and all this coming and going from the hole is taking its toll on the male Quetzal's magnificent tail. The chicks are now 2 weeks old, and the adults are feeding them on lizards and insects. When the male enters the nest, he turns so that his long tail plumes hang out over the top of his head, a perfect imitation of the ferns growing on the tree. There's little seasonal variation here, and trees flower and fruit throughout the year. A Chiapas squirrel gorges on the fruits that are ripening near the Quetzal nest, 25 meters above the ground. Even higher up is a very scarce and rarely seen visitor. The horned guan is a strange turkey-sized bird that lives only in the cloud forest canopy. The function of the red fleshy horn is still a mystery. A pair of stripe-backed tanagers are feasting on the same fruits. The female is the duller of the two. The horned guan retreats into the foliage, a rare glimpse of a very elusive bird. Close by, high in the canopy, on the flimsy outermost branches of a tree, is the nest of one of the world's rarest birds. The azure-rumped tanager has never been filmed or even photographed. In fact, it hasn't been seen for 50 years. They've only ever been seen on 2 occasions. It was in 1868 that the first one was discovered. In 1937, the second and last one was recorded and collected as a museum specimen. This is the first sighting since then. The pair seem to be successfully raising 2 chicks, and a second nest was seen nearby, so that makes at least 8 individuals that we know of, more than anyone has ever set eyes on before. The structure of the nest, which is covered in lichens, and the fact that the 2 sexes look similar are details not known until now. Clearly, both male and female tanagers feed the chicks, which are no more than 2 days old. With luck, there'll be other pairs nesting on these remote hillsides. But in some parts of the Chiapas, the logging companies are moving in. It would be a tragedy to lose this bird, which for 50 years was thought to have become extinct. The Quetzal's 2 chicks are now nearly 4 weeks old and almost fully fledged. They wait at the entrance of the nest to be fed. Their diet has changed. It's now mostly fruit in the form of the small avocados that grow wild here in Quetzal country. Two days later, and a young Quetzal has left the nest. It will be some time before it develops the brilliant plumage of the adult and the gorgeous tail feathers that Montezuma wore. Only then will it become a resplendent Quetzal, the spirit of the cloud forest, to be revered as much today as it was by the Aztecs long ago.
In a remote corner of southern China is a small but vitally important marsh. Maipo is the only protected wetland in Southeast Asia, and hundreds of thousands of migratory birds depend upon it. The marsh is split by a high security fence, with China on one side and Hong Kong on the other. But in 1997, the fence will lose its significance when Hong Kong reverts back to the Chinese. New towns are being built in anticipation of their taking over the colony. The urban desert is advancing. Mai Po remains as yet untouched, an oasis in the Orient. Hong Kong lies on the southern coast of the People's Republic of China. Besides its famous high-rise cities, Hong Kong also includes 250 islands and an area of 1,000 square kilometers known as the New Territories. The Mai Po Marshes are in the far northwest, on the Chinese border. Mai Po lies on the main flyway between Siberia and Australasia. The extensive mudflats in Deep Bay on the seaward side of the marsh are vital feeding grounds for thousands of migratory birds. Among these common black-headed gulls is an extremely rare visitor. There are probably no more than a few hundred Saunders gulls in the world. They are so scarce, nobody knows where they breed. Unlike the black-headed gull, which has an orange bill, the Saunders gull has a dark bill and is slightly smaller. For the gulls and the avocets, Mai Po is a winter home. For others, it is simply a staging post between northern breeding grounds and winter quarters further south. But Mai Po is not just a haven for birds. The seemingly featureless mudflats are literally crawling with life. Mudskippers are common here. Unlike other fish, they can walk and breathe out of water. The thick, oozing mud is rich in nutrients. Crabs separate out edible particles, filtering the sludge through their mandibles. The mudflats are a seemingly inexhaustible source of food, and it is this abundance which attracts the migratory birds. The defensive tactics of a large crab prove too much for a Saunders gull, which goes off in search of easier prey. The curlew sandpiper breeds in northern Siberia. It stops off at Mai Po to feed on ribbon worms before flying on to Australia, where it spends the winter. The greenshank's slender bill enables it to probe into the mud for food. Mudskippers are a favorite prey, but once down their holes, they're well out of the reach of even the longest bill. Only the unwary are at risk. When the danger has passed, the skippers re-emerge to feed. The males are highly territorial and warn off intruders by raising their dorsal fin. They continually attempt to increase the size of their territory, constantly challenging their closest rivals. An ancient mangrove forest grows by the shore. It is a place of refuge for tidal birds and a favorite hunting ground for resident birds like the banded rail. At low tide, fiddler crabs emerge from the mud. Each crab has its own burrow, which it keeps meticulously clean. The females have two small claws of equal size, and both are used exclusively for feeding. The fiddlers are not the only crabs in the mangroves, but they're one of the largest and by far the most colorful. Although the male's fiddle claw is useless for feeding, it's important for communication, signaling mood and intention to other crabs. Each male defends the territory round its burrow and will spar with all adversaries. But these battles are trials of strength and seldom result in injury. Mangrove trees take terrestrial life out to sea. A large variety of animals occupy the canopy, although few are true mangrove dwellers. Black tree ants, which build aerial nests out of leaves, occur with equal opportunism throughout Hong Kong. Many butterflies and moths lay their eggs on the plants growing at the landward edge of the forest. This exotic caterpillar will become a blue-spotted crow butterfly. Twice a day, the tide brings water from the open ocean, and with it the nutrients which make the mangrove such a diverse and rich habitat. The mudflats and the mangrove forest lie in a no-man's land between China and Hong Kong. The border fence offers protection from human disturbance, and as a result, the area behind it has become a haven for wildlife. On the Hong Kong side of the fence, a series of ponds provides a home for coots, which move down from China to Mai Po for the winter. These bold birds are quick to investigate stocks of fish food stored in huts on shore. With them are tree sparrows, which replace house sparrows in the east, and a local form of the black rat, all thriving on food provided unintentionally by man. It's said that coots will fight off enemies by kicking water in their faces. When an eastern marsh harrier forces the coots into open water, it seems as if there may be some truth in the story. But this tactic doesn't always pay off. For all the panic it causes, the marsh harrier is highly sensitive, and its numbers are dwindling. Like all predators, it lives at the top of the food chain and is the first to suffer when things go wrong. Perhaps the harrier's decline is a sign that all is not well in the Mai Po marshes. By mid-March, visiting birds like these avocets have spent nearly 5 months at the Mai Po marshes. As the time for their departure draws nearer, they circle over the ponds behind the mangrove forest where they've spent the winter. These ponds, called gay wais, were dug to farm shrimp and fish during the early days of human settlement in Hong Kong. But traditional methods are less profitable today, and many of the old gay wais have been deepened for fish culture or left neglected. Those ponds still in use have a sluice which controls the flow of the tide. A net across the sluice allows shrimp larvae and fish fry in from the sea, but stops the adults from escaping as the tide goes out. Waders, like these Australian curlews, feed in Deep Bay, next to the marsh, at low tide, but roost in the ponds when the tide is high. Due to the abundant supply of food, the ponds also support a wide variety of resident birds. The shrimp are harvested at night on each spring tide, but twice a year each pond is drained to net the fish. Predatory fish like Chinese perch are left for the birds. But mullet and tilapia will be sent to market or returned to the water to mature. Each gaywa is separated by a broad earth wall, or bund. The bunds are ideal nest sites for the common kingfisher, a subspecies of our European variety. It may take several weeks for each pair to complete a nest burrow, and they may dig several before they finally settle down. As the water recedes, small fish are concentrated in the shallows and become easy prey for the kingfisher. The yellow-bellied wren warbler and the spotted munia flourish in the reed beds which grow on and around the bunds. Another resident of the reed beds is the white-breasted waterhen. This rail normally feeds on small fish, worms and insects, but will scavenge when the opportunity arises. As the water continues to drain away, an increasing number of birds like this common sandpiper are attracted to the gaywa. A black-capped kingfisher seizes the chance to snatch shrimp from the now very shallow water. Although large numbers of birds frequent the marsh, they're able to share the same habitat by using different feeding techniques. The random scooping of the spoonbills contrasts with the egret's precision. The little ringed plover feels in the mud with its feet, detecting its prey by the slightest movement. By the beginning of April, only a few migrants remain, and the fish are left for the resident egrets and herons as the breeding season approaches. Only 3 egretaries remain in Hong Kong, and the largest is behind the village of Mai Po, at the edge of the marsh. The little egrets are the first to start breeding. By now, most of them are incubating eggs. 3 species of egret and 2 kinds of heron breed in the colony. The cattle egrets, pure white for most of the year, are resplendent in their breeding plumage. After an incubation period of 21 days, the little egret chicks hatch. It'll be 10 days before they open their eyes, and another 3 weeks before they're fully fledged. The last egg has still to hatch. As long as the adults can hear the chick piping inside it, they will continue to turn and incubate the egg. About 50 pairs of Chinese pond herons also breed here. Both sexes molt into distinctive breeding colors, but the male is the brighter of the pair. The nesting season lasts from March to August, and as long as there's plenty of fish, the chicks will grow fast. By the time the cattle egrets start nest building, the little egret's brood will be several weeks old. Building material is now in short supply, and there's a great deal of recycling between the nests. The little egrets are the smallest birds in the colony, but their aggressive behavior compensates for their lack of size. They are constantly thieving from the more docile cattle egrets. On this occasion, the cattle egret was lucky to lose no more than a few twigs. Although the egretry may appear chaotic, it's governed by the steady rhythm of the seasons. The rains bring new life, so to ensure there's plenty of food for the chicks when they hatch, the eggs are laid shortly before the wet season. As dusk falls and searchlights blaze along the border fence, the last birds feeding out in the bay return to roost in the protected backwaters of the marsh. Even with the first of the summer storms about to break, the marsh is far from deserted at night. Drawn by the lights, fish gather in the pools below the fence, where night herons keep watch. The drab juveniles accompany the sleek grey adults to the best feeding grounds. Eventually, the storm breaks, shattering the stillness of the night. The rain refreshes the marsh, but the storms can cause havoc at the egretry. The strong winds blow young birds out of their nests. Those which manage to clamber back into the upper branches where their parents can find them stand a good chance of survival. But for those which fall to the road below, there is little hope. For the most part, the mood is one of celebration. The storm has cleared the air, and the rain has brought with it a new lease of life. Unlike the other herons and egrets, cattle egrets feed mainly on insects. Pond skaters are an important source of food at this time of year. But recently, their numbers have been dwindling at an alarming rate. Pond skaters are seriously affected by pollution. Pollutants alter the molecular structure of the water, reducing the surface tension to such an extent that the insects sink through and drown. Pollution levels in the marsh are causing concern. Untreated agricultural and urban effluent now flows freely into Deep Bay. The drainage streams and channels once ran clear and clean. Today the water is black, foul, and totally devoid of life. There are new plans to widen the shipping lanes which run past the marshes from Deep Bay into China. This could prove disastrous for migrant birds, which are already seriously disturbed by river traffic. With each high tide, polluted water from Deep Bay now flushes over the mudflats and through the marsh, threatening all the animals which live there. In 40 years, the population of Hong Kong has risen from 600,000 to 5.5 million. The demand for low-lying land is desperate. Development on all sides is like a noose drawn tight around the shrinking marsh. To safeguard its future, the World Wildlife Fund has bought about 1/6 of Mai Po as a nature reserve. But what will happen in 1997 when Hong Kong becomes part of China? Then it will be up to the Chinese to decide if the Mai Po marshes will survive, an oasis in the Orient.